But I eased, you know. I eased now. Took a commercial break, you know. Okay. It was very nice but very dangerous. It was the greatest college I've ever been, but the most expensive school.
In the 1980s, Gregory Isaacs, known as the Cool Ruler, was arrested on related charges.
Gregory Isaacs. To reggae fans, he was the cool ruler, the silky voice behind timeless classics like Night Nurse. But 15 years after his death in London, a darker truth still shadows his legacy. Behind the music and fame was a world of crime, crack, and scandals that almost erased his music legacy.
I learned a lot from it, both good and bad. I wouldn't encourage anybody to try it.
From Kingston's rough streets to prison cells, courtrooms, and hospital beds, Isaacs lived a double life few fans ever saw.
June, his wife, recounted how the cool ruler struggled with his demons, particularly his battle with crack addiction, which she witnessed unfold.
This is the untold story of the cool ruler and the secrets he tried to keep hidden. Gregory Anthony Isaacs was born on July 15, 1951, in Fletcher's Land, a rough area of Kingston, Jamaica. Like many young men in Kingston during the 1960s, survival meant hustling on the streets. He got involved in selling marijuana for Toddy Livingston, the father of Bunny Wailer, one of the founding members of the Wailers. At the same time, he was connected to Lester Lloyd Coke, better known as Jim Brown, a feared Kingston gangster. These early ties placed Isaacs close to the underworld before music ever made him famous. Isaacs' first break in music came in the late 1960s when he entered talent contests and began recording singles. His voice was different, smooth, romantic, almost whisper-like compared to the heavy roots reggae of the time. By the mid-1970s, Isaacs had carved his own lane in the genre known as lovers rock, a softer style of reggae centered on romance and emotion.
So how is it that you started singing?
Well, from early childhood, differently. My friends used to tell me that I'm good. You understand? Like school concert and those things.
In 1973, he formed the African Museum label with fellow singer Errol Dunkley, releasing tracks that quickly gained attention in Jamaica. But it was the late 1970s and early 1980s when his career really took off. He signed with Virgin Records and then Island Records, releasing international hits like Soon Forward, Private Secretary, and Tune In.
I produced a song with Errol Dunkley called Movie Star, right, which was a cover version.
Yeah.
The peak came in 1982 with Night Nurse, a song that broke beyond Jamaica and earned him global recognition. The track showcased Isaacs' effortless cool, a man who seemed untouchable, standing apart from the violence and poverty of Kingston streets. Fans called him the Cool Ruler, a nickname that stuck for life.
Tell her try your best just to make it quick.
But while Isaacs' career was climbing, so were his personal struggles. Friends and industry insiders noticed that his lifestyle was chaotic. Isaacs had begun experimenting with particularly, which was becoming widespread in Jamaica's music circles at the time. Some say the first signs of trouble came when his punctuality and reliability on stage began slipping. Others point to his increasingly erratic behavior behind closed doors. By the early 1980s, Isaacs was living two lives. On stage, he was the king of lovers rock, adored by fans worldwide. Off stage, he was deeply tied to Kingston's street culture, both through friendships with gangsters and through growing dependency on hard. These cracks in his image would only widen in the years to come, pulling him into a cycle of addiction, crime, and prison that would haunt him for the rest of his life. By the early 1980s, at the height of his career, Gregory Isaacs had one of the most distinctive voices in reggae. But away from the stage, particularly crack was consuming his life. Isaacs himself later admitted that drug use was his biggest downfall, describing it as the greatest college ever, but the most expensive school fee ever paid.
It was very nice but very dangerous. It was the greatest college I've ever been.
The addiction grew rapidly. What started as casual use escalated into a daily dependency. Friends and bandmates spoke about how he would disappear for days during recording sessions. On tour, promoters complained that Isaacs was unreliable, sometimes showing up late, sometimes not at all. His once silky voice began to lose its clarity, strained by both use and the toll on his health. The problem wasn't just professional, it was also criminal. To maintain his addiction, Isaacs began moving deeper into the world. Reports suggest he dealt and associated with Kingston's criminal networks, the same ones he had brushed shoulders with as a youth. This double-life international star and street hustler couldn't last.
In 1983, Gregory encountered legal issues when Jamaican police raided his home and discovered cocaine and illegal firearms, leading to a time in jail.
In 1982, just as Night Nurse was climbing international charts, Isaacs was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in prison for possession of unlicensed firearms. It was one of at least 27 arrests he faced during his lifetime. He later claimed the guns were for his own protection, but many fans and critics saw the conviction as proof of how far he had drifted from the polished, cool ruler image. Prison didn't stop his use. In fact, after release, Isaac's addiction worsened. Dominated his personal life. At home, his wife June recalled walking into a hotel room in the late 1980s and catching him snorting lines of. His paranoia grew. He became aggressive, financially unstable, and often absent for long stretches. The physical toll was devastating. Isaacs lost most of his teeth to use, changing his appearance and further weakening his ability to sing. Fans who had once seen him as the suave, confident, lonely lover were now watching a man unravel before their eyes. Concertgoers began whispering about missed notes, slurred performances, and erratic behavior on stage. Even so, Isaacs tried to keep working. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he released dozens of albums, sometimes multiple in a single year. But the quality was uneven, and his reputation for unreliability grew stronger than his music. Promoters hesitated to book him. Collaborators became cautious. The very addiction that fueled his paranoia was also destroying his livelihood.
Estimated that you'd done somewhere in the region of about 500 albums.
I'm not doing that, I don't think I answer.
Or maybe you don't know about half of them.
By the late 1990s, Isaac's career was in pieces. Once a global icon, he was now seen as a cautionary tale. The habit not only drained his health, but also robbed him of what could have been an even greater musical legacy. Yet despite it all, he still had flashes of brilliance, moments that reminded the world of his unmatched talent. Gregory Isaacs' battles with the law were as legendary as his music. Over the course of his life, he was arrested more than 27 times, an astonishing record that mirrored the turbulence of Jamaica in the 1970s and 1980s. Weapons and street clashes repeatedly pulled him into the system. The most infamous arrest came in 1982, just as Night Nurse was rising in the UK charts. Police raided Isaac's home and found unlicensed firearms. To authorities, he was a dangerous figure, blending music with criminality. To fans, he was a victim of a harsh system and his own bad choices. The court sentenced him to 6 months in prison. Behind bars, Isaac's reputation only grew. Fellow inmates admired him, and guards reportedly gave him space, knowing his global fame. Yet prison was no rehabilitation. Still shaped his life, and on release, he slipped deeper into addiction.
Behind bars, he turned despair into inspiration. Isaacs performed a raw, emotional concert for fellow inmates.
The 1980s and 1990s brought a cycle of arrests. Isaacs was repeatedly picked up for possession and violent altercations. He moved with men linked to Kingston's underworld, and some reports claimed he financed parts of his habit through dealing. Though never convicted of trafficking on a major scale, his name floated in Kingston streets as both artist and hustler. The chaos spilled into his family life. Isaac's wife, June, once revealed that police raids on their home became routine. The couple's relationship deteriorated as Gregory's temper flared. Paranoia made him aggressive, and the constant arrests pushed their marriage toward collapse.
The newlyweds were still enjoying the bliss of marriage in 1984 when Gregory was arrested and charged for illegal possession of firearms.
Even at his lowest points, Isaacs never stopped recording. He famously released albums while under investigation or awaiting trial. One of the strangest contrasts of his life was how prison time seemed to fuel his creativity. Songs like Cool Down the Pace carried hints of his struggles, wrapped in his smooth delivery. For Isaacs, music was both escape and confession. Still, the system took its toll. Extended legal battles drained his money. Touring visas became harder to secure, with promoters reluctant to book an artist who might not show up or who might be detained mid-tour. By the late 1990s, Isaac's international career was shackled as much by the courts as by drugs. His arrests also damaged his image in reggae culture. Some fans admired the outlaw persona, comparing him to Peter Tosh or even Bob Marley's rebellious edge. Others saw a man throwing away his gifts, more headline than hitmaker. Isaacs himself admitted in interviews that he had no one to blame but himself, once saying, "I was my own worst enemy." Prison life left scars. Isaacs lost weight, lost teeth, and carried the trauma of confinement. Yet paradoxically, these years also hardened his legend. Gregory Isaacs became not just the cool ruler, but a symbol of survival in the face of self-destruction and state punishment. Behind Gregory Isaacs' smooth love songs lay a stormy private life. While his stage persona was the cool ruler, his relationships were anything but calm. Accounts from those closest to him paint a picture of domestic chaos fueled by drugs, paranoia, and bursts of violence. Isaacs married June, a woman who stood by him during some of his peak years, but their union was deeply troubled. It had become central to his daily routine, and the paranoia it sparked often turned his home into a battleground. June later admitted that police raids were so frequent that their house stopped feeling like a safe space. She also hinted at violent altercations, with Isaacs lashing out under the influence.
In December of 1983, Gregory Isaacs was firmly established as an international recording star and father of 10 when he and longtime soulmate June Wyndham decided to tie the knot.
One widely reported incident involved Isaacs allegedly attacking his wife during a heated argument. Neighbors recalled loud shouting and even broken glass. Though formal charges didn't always stick, the rumors surrounding his temper grew stronger with every year. For many, Isaacs represented the dark side of fame when global success clashed with unhealed wounds and unchecked addiction.
About how you were affected by his addiction.
I don't want to elaborate much on that, Winford, but all I can say, I was affected.
Yes?
Yes.
It was hurtful?
That's what caused the breakdown.
Violence wasn't limited to his marriage. Associates from Kingston's music circles have described Isaacs as charming but unpredictable. In one interview, he was accused of threatening girlfriends and female companions when high, often accusing them of betrayal or theft. Some saw him as a victim of paranoia. Others argued that the only unleashed what was already inside him. Children also bore the weight of Isaac's lifestyle. He fathered multiple kids, but his presence as a father was inconsistent. Court disputes over child support surfaced, and stories circulated of Isaac's disappearing for days in binges while his family struggled to maintain stability. Despite this, several of his children later spoke of loving him deeply, torn between admiration for his talent and pain from his failings.
And we took all of them, so...
You took all the kids?
Right. We had all 10 kids living there.
You became mother for all of them?
The contradictions were staggering. On stage, Isaacs could sing tender ballads like All I Have Is Love or Loving Pauper, drawing tears from fans. Yet in private, he sometimes showed little of that tenderness to those closest to him. This duality became part of his legacy, a man capable of expressing love to the world but unable to consistently embody it at home. By the 1990s, his domestic struggles had spilled into the media. Tabloids in Jamaica and the UK ran headlines about fights with women, binges, and police calls to his residence. The press painted him as reggae's fallen star, a man who had lost control not only of his career, but of his household.
As I said, the marriage had gone, we were just good friends.
Still, Isaacs was not entirely without remorse. In rare candid moments, he admitted to hurting those around him. He once reflected, "I gave love in my songs, but maybe not enough in my life." Those words, though late, showed glimpses of self-awareness, even if they came after decades of damage. By the mid-1980s, Gregory Isaacs was no longer just another reggae singer. He was a global star. But behind the scenes, a deadly addiction was taking over. Which started as a casual escape, quickly became the defining force of his life. Isaacs himself once admitted, "Was my downfall. It mashed me up." His voice in interviews carried both shame and defiance, as though he knew he had lost everything yet couldn't stop himself from chasing the high. Friends recall that what began as occasional use soon turned into full-blown dependency. By the late 80s, Isaacs was smoking crack daily, often shutting himself in hotel rooms, missing shows, and letting promoters down. Promoters worldwide began to share the same story. Isaacs would be booked, hyped, and advertised, but when the night of the show came, he either showed up late, performed sloppily, or didn't arrive at all. His binges made him unreliable. In one infamous case, Isaacs collapsed mid-performance, forcing the band to improvise.
In September, the tour was down to the last 3 shows on the US leg when Gregory reportedly developed a life-threatening illness. On stage,
The addiction also reshaped his appearance. The once sharp, well-dressed cool ruler began to look frail, his cheeks hollow and his suits hanging loose. Fans who hadn't seen him in years were shocked at his transformation. Rumors spread that Isaacs was dying even back then, decades before his actual death.
I heard rumors on the road that he was really sick, badly sick, and that other rumors of him dying.
His crack habit destroyed more than just his health. It drained his finances. Isaacs, who had once been one of Jamaica's highest-earning reggae stars, reportedly spent fortunes on Associates claimed that much of his wealth was burned away on binges that lasted days. He pawned jewelry, borrowed heavily, and leaned on friends in the music industry for financial support. Worse, his addiction fueled paranoia. Isaacs became convinced that people were plotting against him, stealing from him, or setting him up. That paranoia led to fights with band members, mistrust of managers, and violent confrontations with women in his life. As one associate put it, Gregory's biggest enemy was the pie. Despite the chaos, Isaacs kept recording. Even at the height of his crack years, he produced albums and singles, but critics noted the dip in quality. The smooth, commanding voice that once carried songs like Night Nurse began to sound thin, strained, and weary. Some fans remained loyal, but others quietly turned to younger reggae stars who were sober and consistent. Attempts at rehab were made, but rarely lasted. Isaacs would enter treatment centers only to relapse weeks later. He admitted openly that had an iron grip on him. His words carried a tragic honesty. "The took me over. I couldn't control it." By the 1990s, Gregory Isaacs was no longer seen as reggae's shining star, but as one of its biggest cautionary tales. He was still loved, still respected for his earlier brilliance, but his reputation was forever scarred by crack. On October 25, 2010, Gregory Isaacs, the man the world knew as the Cool Ruler, passed away in his London home after a long battle with lung cancer. He was only 59 years old. His death closed the book on one of reggae's most complicated lives, a career filled with global hits but also destroyed by violence and controversy.
When he found out that chest pains he was having were symptoms of a malignant tumor, and after ignoring the doctor's order to remove the tumor.
In the weeks leading up to his passing, Isaacs was frail and barely recognizable. The once smooth-voiced singer who had enchanted millions could no longer perform. Friends said that years of had left his body broken, making it impossible for him to fight the disease when it struck. His wife, Linda, confirmed that the cancer diagnosis came after decades of health decline caused by his addictions. News of his death sent shockwaves through the reggae community. Tributes poured in from artists worldwide. Jimmy Cliff, Shaggy, Beres Hammond, and even international musicians outside of reggae paid respect. Many remembered him not only for his music, but for the charisma and style that made him Jamaica's most elegant performer.
There's no question about him himself that way, so other than that, he's just a fun-loving person. He's very kind.
But the tributes were mixed with sadness. Fans couldn't help but reflect on the way Isaacs had sabotaged himself. His 40-plus arrests, his binges, and his ruined performances were impossible to ignore. For some, his legacy was not just the brilliance of Night Nurse, but also the tragedy of wasted potential. At his funeral in Kingston, thousands of Jamaicans lined the streets. His body, dressed in a sharp suit, lay in a gleaming casket, while his music played loudly in the background. Government officials honored him as a cultural icon, but among fans, the conversations were honest. Gregory Isaacs was both a genius and a man destroyed by his demons.
Started to get involved in music and use it as a method.
Even after his death, controversies followed. Some critics pointed out how the industry enabled Isaacs for decades, turning a blind eye to his use as long as he brought in money. Others focused on the lawsuits and allegations from his past, arguing that his personal darkness should never be ignored when celebrating his music. Still, the music lives on. Songs like Night Nurse, Rumors, and Number One continue to be played worldwide, reminding listeners of the raw talent that once defined Isaacs. Younger reggae artists cite him as an influence, even as they acknowledge his troubled life. In the immediate aftermath of his death, radio stations across Jamaica and the UK dedicated entire days to his catalog. Television specials revisited his 1970s and 1980s dominance, highlighting his legendary performances at Sunsplash and his work with producers like Sly and Robbie. Newspapers carried front-page tributes, while fans flocked to shops searching for his classic vinyl records. His funeral procession through Kingston turned into a national event. Streets were blocked off as crowds followed the motorcade, chanting his lyrics and waving flags in Rastafarian colors. Fellow artists such as Freddie McGregor, Luciano, and Marcia Griffiths attended, while the Jamaican government formally recognized Isaacs as one of the island's cultural ambassadors. Outside Jamaica, tribute concerts were held in London, New York, and Toronto. In Brixton, hundreds gathered at community halls to honor the singer who had given reggae one of its most international love anthems. For weeks, reggae forums and fan clubs circulated rare recordings and bootleg performances, keeping Isaac's presence alive long after his burial. It's been 15 years since his death, yet Gregory Isaacs' story still fascinates the world. Some fans say he was reggae's greatest loverman. Others argue he was the genre's most tragic figure. What remains undeniable is that Isaacs left behind a catalog of music that ensures he will never be forgotten.